So I was given the death penalty, but because I pleaded guilty, my sentence was then commuted to life imprisonment. And life in Thailand is 100 years. And next thing, I just heard him squealing, and I could hear the guy stabbing him. I could actually see his feet. And they had paid money to have this guy killed. I mean, your life in prison, especially in a Thai prison, it's only worth what the moment dictates. You could have somebody stabbed for 500 baht.
What's the story, everybody? Pete here from Thairish Times. Hope you're doing well out there. I've got a really fascinating story for you today, folks. My guest today has spent 18 years in the Thai prison system. He has spent time in prisons that you've seen in movies, you've read in books, the Bangkok Hilton. It's a fascinating story. It's an amazing story. It's a scary story. It's an exhilarating story. It's terrifying. There's a whole list of adjectives I can use to describe it. You're going to go through a whole range of emotions watching it, as did I. But it's also a story of a man who has made mistakes in his life, owns up to his mistakes, and has turned his life around. You know, my opinion on human nature is we're very resilient, and when 99% of us have our backs up against the wall, we come out swinging and we survive. So let's get straight into it. Hear his story today. It's a long one, but it's a really good one. Get yourself a cup of tea, coffee, beer, whatever. Sit down, relax. Let's get straight into it. And also shout out to you, Mark, for making it happen, because you put me in contact with Shani. So thank you very much for sharing Shani's details with me. And also Shani's written a book that I read before this interview. It's an amazing book. So I'm going to link that down below as well. If you're interested in the prison stories and Thailand, it covers both those aspects really well. And he's also an artist as well, Shani is. So I'm going to link his Facebook as well and his Instagram as well. So if you're interested in checking out some of Shani's art, or perhaps you just want to send him a message, you'll be able to do so as well. So let's get straight into it. Hope you enjoy it, folks. Cheers. Thank you very much for coming on. I'm really excited. I've been waiting for this one for a while because I know it's an excellent story. So it was drugs that ultimately set you on a path in life that led to you spending 18 years in a Thai prison. Can you tell us, give us a bit about the background? You know, how did you get involved in drugs and ultimately become a drug addict and then a drug dealer?
Okay, so I mean, in my teens, I mean, I was like a great sportsman. You know, I was totally anti-drugs, anti-weed, and it was in high school that I was first kind of exposed to a bunch of my own friends who used to sneak off at parties, and you could actually smell the weed, you know. So, but I managed to distance myself from it. And then it was final year of high school where one of my best mates had invited me to join him and a couple of teachers to have a joint. It was on speech night. So that was kind of the first time we got together and went to this bird sanctuary. And, you know, I took a few puffs on a joint and it didn't really do much to me. And then at the end of matric, which was finals, high school, we went down to the coast to celebrate, and some of my mates down there also were smoking, and that's how I started just using marijuana recreationally. Little did I know that I had this addictive personality, but also that was in December. In January, I was heading off to the army. I'd been called up for a 2-year stint, which was compulsory in those days. So there again, I mean, I was extremely fit, and I was trained as a foot soldier, and then I specialized in 91 millimeter mortarist. But we were fighting a war at that time in Angola, which a lot of us were totally against, and we didn't even know what we were fighting about. So I managed to get out of the fighting unit and join the military band. And I didn't even know how to play a musical instrument, which was another great story in itself. But the 6-7 of us who didn't want to go to the border, we were all like-minded, kindred spirits, and we all smoked weed. So that's where it actually started to intensify, that we were smoking weed every day, and which eventually led me to organizing my own stash from the coast. So I would hike down in my army uniform, take whatever money I had, and go and buy like a coffee can of weed, bring it back to Johannesburg, pack it, start selling it at the club. So I wouldn't say I was a drug dealer at that stage. It was just supporting a habit and just making it easier, more easily accessible. So that's how it started. And marijuana being a gateway to harder drugs. I then eventually got caught up in experimenting with a drug called Mandrax, which actually kind of eats the marrow in your bones. So you smoke it with weed, and it's extremely addictive, and it's like a downer. It's probably something like heroin. And then before I knew it, I was addicted to that, and then also dealing in Mandrax. And then I started taking LSD here and there, and then sniffing cocaine, and then dealing in cocaine. So that's how it led to me, because the more I sold, the more I used, or the more I used, the more I sold, and became a full-fledged drug addict. So although I did work as a salesman, I was in the clothing industry, but I could never keep a job. I got fired from most of my jobs, and I managed to get a firearm from a very early age. So I was a bit of a lunatic, running around like a crazy guy, So threatening my bosses and that, and they'd say, "Oh, you fired," and everything. And I'll pull out my gun and I'm telling them, "No, I'm not fired. I'm not going anywhere." And anyway, it was a crazy time, So.
And then Shani, how did Thailand come into it then?
So it's around the time that that was like mid-90s, early 90s. The guys that I'd been dealing with for quite a while already started going to Thailand and taking China White through to New York, because heroin became like quite a fashionable drug at that time. People were like sniffing this. They called it pure China White. And my guy had done 1 or 2 trips, and he kept asking me, like, you should come in with us. This good money to be made. And I'm like, heroin's a bad luck drug. I don't really want to get involved in that shit. So, but now I'm a heavy cocaine addict at that time. So I was smoking freebasing, which is like smoking crack cocaine, where you take it from powder form and you cook it into rocks and you smoke that in a glass pipe. And that was extremely addictive, and I just couldn't get out of it. I had suffered 2 seizures and I almost died. And then my family stepped in and they said to me, "Look, if you don't stop, we're going to take a tough love approach, and we want nothing more to do with you. And we suggest maybe you take a holiday, go overseas, go work on a kibbutz, but you have to change. You have to change yourself and change your friends, because, we can't see you lasting much longer." So anyway, so my friend, my one dealer at the time, I said to him, "Listen, sure, here's an opportunity here. I need to go away for a while, get out of Johannesburg. Let's set up a trip." So that's how it all happened. That he said, "Okay, cool." So I thought, to me, it was like, okay, I'll have a holiday at the same time. I could also do a trip and make money and have more money for drugs. So that was the addict mindset at the time. And that's how I got to come to Thailand. I mean, I didn't know much about Thailand and the laws of Thailand, although I think many of us were aware, like with Singapore and Malaysia, that they had the death penalty for drugs. But I mean, I knew absolutely nothing about Thailand, funny enough.
How did you actually get caught, and was it a setup? Can you talk us through the process of actually getting caught?
Okay, so from the time I arrived in Thailand, I had this uneasy feeling. It was almost like I was being followed, and especially the hotel that I was staying in. like when I used to go out in the lobby, you'd have all these taxi drivers sitting there reading newspapers. And then as I'd walk through, they would like whisper to each other, the newspapers would drop. So I felt very uncomfortable. And I'd phoned my guy a few days later and said, look, things don't look good here. I'm suspecting I'm being watched. And having dealt drugs for 16 years in South Africa and always on the run from the cops, one step ahead, you kind of get a sixth sense when there are cops around. And he said to me, listen, he said, you're being paranoid. He said, don't worry about a thing. And even if they catch you, they're never going to know where the drugs are. So, okay, I put my mind at ease, blah, blah, blah. I met with the drug dealers. I had money to give them. I handed over the envelope, and they gave me this leather satchel, which was quite big, which had compartments in it. So it felt heavy. I mean, there was 2.4 kilos of heroin, which was compressed and very professionally sewn into these compartments. So unless you knew the drugs were there, it would have been impossible to detect it, which I kept in my room. And I went about as a normal tourist, although I did get into a few fights in a nightclub, and the police were there. And I had a big fight in my hotel lobby where I attacked the manager and broke furniture, and they called the cops. So, but I think that's like what a normal tourist does, so it wouldn't look like I was smuggling drugs. So I was just having like a party, Anyway, so going to the airport now, one of the taxi drivers had befriended me. And when I was leaving from the hotel and on the way to the airport, I was getting really nervous. Like all I wanted to do was just jump out. I had such a bad feeling. My gut instinct was telling me something was amiss. Anyway, we get to the airport, go to the X-ray machine, I put my bags through, and I'm still like saying a little prayer to myself that if I get through this, I'm going to stop drugs. Please, God, can you close the eyes of the security here? And I got away with so much all my life. I just thought, well, I'm going to get away with this, I hope. Anyway, so then when I arrived at the departure lounge, there were no other passengers. It was just me. And now I'm really thinking something's wrong. Anyway, I go to the counter, to the passport counter, I hand him my passport, and I could see that the teller was also extremely nervous. And then through the corner of my eye, I noticed these commandos in black SWAT uniforms that was in machine guns, walkie-talkies. And before I knew it, I was surrounded with a gun pointing at my head. And the one guy pointed straight to the leather satchel where the drugs were and said to me in broken English, does this belong to you? I think I still made like a joke, and I said like, well, hello, I'm the only passenger here. Anyway, they didn't find that funny, and they grabbed the leather satchel and escorted me to an interrogation room where I didn't even have to say anything. I was taken into this room. They emptied the contents of the satchel, took out a knife, opened it, took it out, weighed it. So they knew exactly where it was, what time I was going to be there. I mean, they were waiting for me. It was a setup. So there are a few possible scenarios. So, the usual story that I learned afterwards was that it was most likely that I was used as a decoy, and that the drug dealers had sent out maybe a couple of other people on other flights with larger quantities. So that's one possibility. But when I look back and I look at how many people got caught, not only in the month of April, but that year, but especially in April, May, June, there was a huge clampdown. So what I imagine happened was that America has been financing the war on drugs since the Vietnamese War on heroin in the Golden Triangle. And they've never won that war, and the heroin's still going through. So I'm thinking America was putting pressure on Thailand and saying, unless they show numbers of arrests, they're going to stop the millions of dollars that they're giving Thailand to fight this war on drugs. And then the police made a deal with the dealers that they must start selling out foreigners, because about 29 Americans got arrested. There were maybe 14 South Africans and maybe 100 Nigerians. I mean, so many foreigners were getting caught, one after the other. So that's what I think happened. We were sold out and set up. So that's how I reckon I got caught.
How did you feel the moment when the police cut the bag and removed the heroin? How did you feel in that moment?
So I want to tell you something. I could hear my heart pounding. I mean, I felt sick in my gut. My temples I thought were going to burst, and I think that feeling of like the world closing in on you, you know. So I was struggling to breathe, and you know, like you're thinking, is this a bad dream? I mean, I must have been shaking, and I was probably as white as the wall, you know, because I knew that I was in big shit, you know. So and you kind of think that, you know, this wasn't meant to happen. This isn't how this was meant to go down, you know. So, and you don't speak the language, but the thing was that soon after they cut all that out, I was then interrogated by the DEA. So, you know, with these guys speaking English to me, you know, there I felt a little bit more relaxed. You know, I mean, obviously I had no idea where I was going, what was going to happen. So it was scary, you know, I mean, extremely scary, you know. So it's nothing like I've ever experienced before. You know, it's not like you being marched into the principal's office or something, or you're going to get a jack or something. This was serious stuff. And I mean, if you think of movies like Midnight Express, and you've seen all these prison movies, so I'm having all these visions of this terrible dark place that I'm going to. So yeah, it wasn't easy.
Following your arrest, you were sent to a prison called Bombat Prison. You were on remand there. So can you talk us through the process of actually getting arrested, then being placed in Bombat Prison, and then the lead up to your sentencing? How long did that all take?
Okay, so I'm at the airport. Before we knew it, we were swamped by journalists, cameras flashing. There were two of us caught at this, like within an hour of each other. There was an American guy. He was busted with 4 kilos of heroin. This youngster was 21 years old. And me. And then from there, we were taken to what they call Ratchada police station. And there we were thrown into like quite a big cell. There must have been about 14 other guys. And we were taken up one by one and interrogated, questioned. I was roughed up a little bit by this guy who was interrogating me. They wanted to know who gave me the drugs, where the drugs were going, who my contacts were in South Africa, and all that. And I just refused to talk. I gave false names. And I wasn't about to give any information. So I got hit a little bit around with the telephone book. And I think the guy actually got tired of trying to get information out of me. So we were held at Ratchada Police, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, for 9 days. And after 9 days, we were then taken to court under police escort. And when we arrived in the courts, they had these huge cages, like steel cages that each cage had about maybe 90 to 100 prisoners in that had shackles. They all had these brown uniforms, and the hair was shaven, and there was a lot of noise going on. You know, I was thrown into one of those cages, and then at about 2-3 hours later, I was taken into a courtroom. So it wasn't a very big courtroom. There was just like a magistrate there, and some chairs and people sitting around. And to me, it seemed like a formality. I had to just sign some papers. There was no interpreter or anything. So they just said, sign here, sign here, sign here. And then we were thrown back into the cage. And at about 4 o'clock that afternoon, we were loaded into these prison vehicles, which had no windows. They were completely closed in. They had little bars on top of the truck. And I was still handcuffed to some other guy. And I mean, we were packed in there like sardines. You can't believe it. It was about 80 of us in one of these little vehicles. Anyway, they drove us to Bombard. When we got there, we were pulled out of the truck, and we went through two double steel doors. And as we came through the second door, they had one of the guards there, and he literally grabbed us and pulled us in. And some of the guys were falling down, and this was a big joke to them. We were all lined up, and I had a little bag with some of my stuff in. Most of it was stolen at the police station. My passport was stolen. Anyway, we were stripped naked, and they had like these garden chairs. The guards were sitting on them, and we had to march past in single file and bend over. And then the guards there, they were wearing these latex rubber gloves, and they stuck their fingers up like the prisoner's rectum, and obviously they were looking for drugs or something. And the guy wasn't even wiping his hand, and he was doing one guy, then the next guy. It was my turn, and I'm like going, no, no, no. I'm like protesting. I'm saying, there's no ways I'm gonna bend for this guy. The guard got very upset, and he jumped up and he had this bamboo baton, and he's shouting at me, and he wants to hit me, and he's telling me to bend. And the next thing, this higher authority came past and wanted to know what the commotion was about. Anyway, they exchanged words in Thai, and then the high-ranking officer looked at me and he said, "Okay, never mind. I could move on." So I didn't bend. So I kind of understood at that point as well that as a foreigner, you'd have leverage over the authorities. From there, once all that was done, we were allowed to keep like a change of clothing, but we had to cut our jeans. If you had a long sleeve shirt, they cut your long sleeves, and some toiletries. The rest they put into storage for you. And then we were shackled. We went to this section where they had this big vise. It was which was operated manually. So they had these steel rings that you slip your feet in, and then they pull the steel vise down, and they close these rings on your ankle, just above your ankles. And there was a Thai prisoner there with a 10-pound hammer, and he hammered these rings. So it was, you couldn't slip your foot out, but it was, I'm thinking, flip, if this guy misses, he's gonna shatter my leg. Anyway, everything went quite smoothly, and then we were thrown into a cell. So you can imagine we were 80 of us. The cell was probably accommodating 50 prisoners, not comfortably, which made us like 130 prisoners. So there wasn't room for you to actually lie down. So the guys were sleeping in shifts. Some would sit, others stood around, some would sleep. So, and then while we were there, two of the youngsters who came with us, they were like quite feminine, these two boys. And in the middle of the cell, we had a sunken-in toilet with like a meter wall around it. And they built like a curtain out of rice bags. So you couldn't actually see in, but you could hear whoever was in the toilet or whatever. Anyway, these two youngsters were taken in by a couple of the inmates that were there already. And I imagined that they were raping them, they were having sexual intercourse with them, but there was no resistance or anything. So when the one guy came out, he was bleeding. So, and I was like staring because I'm like totally shocked by all this. And then one of the Thais looked at me from across the room, who had participated in this ritual, and he goes like this to me. So I'm like thinking, I was staring, but I wasn't staring. I'm in a state of shock still through going through all this. And it's a foreign country, you don't speak the language, and I'm flipping. I know this prison looks hectic. I mean, Bombard is a hectic prison. It was designed by the Japanese during the Second World War as a prisoner of war camp. So it's like everything's steel and concrete. There's open sewage systems. It's extremely dirty. It's overcrowded. I've never seen so many different skin diseases. Guys had lumps sticking out of their head. Yeah. And it's all the drug addicts and dealers that are kept in remand there. So it was like quite a shock to the system, you know. So I kind of pretended I didn't see what this guy was doing to me. I looked at the ceiling, and I was with this young American. There were two of us who were caught. And I said to him, look, you just go to sleep. I'm going to stay awake, and I'll just make sure nothing happens to us. Anyway, the evening was uneventful. I didn't sleep a wink. I haven't even slept in like the last 10 days. And then the next day, we had a medical exam, and the food arrived. It came in these huge steel pots. And I remember looking at the rice, and I could swear there were weevils in it, or it was moving. I mean, I could have been hallucinating at this stage. And the Thais have this delicacy, this smelly fish that they dry in the sun on the roofs of their houses. And the Thais were fighting to get to eat this stuff. I mean, and it smelled shocking. I mean, there was no ways I could have eaten that. And then I needed the toilet, but they had communal toilets, like 10 sunken in toilets next to each other, separated by a 1/2 meter wall. There was no toilet paper. Sorry.
This is heavy stuff.
Sorry?
This is heavy stuff, but continue. I'm in awe here.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. And I'm thinking, wow, look at this. And in these sunken in toilets in front, it's got a little water tank, and the water's running from the one end and runs through. And you've got these Tupperware dishes that the guys would eat from, and they would use it to flush when they were on the toilet. So anyway, after our medical examination and all that, we were then divided into different buildings. And I was taken to building 5. But as I was walking past building 4, I saw a lot of foreign prisoners, British, Americans. There were many. So that was already a bit of a source of comfort, thinking, shit, I'm not alone, you know, at least there's some people I can maybe talk to and find out what's going to go down here. Anyway, I was put in the building next door, and they had factories. So they had like a sewing factory where the Thais had to work. They had this factory where they were making with chemicals the silver paper for the Chinese that they burn at funerals and whatever. And the foreigners, I was put in a paper factory, which wasn't really a factory, but it was under. So the building was on stilts, and under the building they had the sewing factory. Then they had like a long veranda, and as you walked in, there was a bit of a temple on the right, a small temple with a big Buddhist statue, and this veranda ran right around. So on both sides, you had people folding paper bags, and each foreigner had to fold 50 bags a day. But if you didn't want to do that, you could give a Thai like 2 cigarettes, and he'd do your quota for the day. I worked because I needed to keep my mind busy. And then we were put into a cell with about 50 guys. And when you walked into the cell, they had these wooden platforms, maybe 1/2 meter high, which was broken, it was rotten, and everybody slept on that. And like basically shoulder to shoulder. That's how crowded it was. And in the middle of the room was a toilet, not even with a curtain, and one big what is it, like a water container. It's a big what's the name, vase, like a ceramic vase, but a big one, and you would drink water out of that. I mean, it was terrible.
And then,
And
Shani, how long did it take for you to
yeah.
actually get sentenced? And how long was your sentence?
Okay, so now you had to go to court every 12 days, 8 times. So in my first court appearance, I pleaded innocent. And this is what I told the cops as well, that I didn't know I had heroin. I was under the impression that I was smuggling forged foreign currency, mainly being dollars. So after my first court appearance, when I got back to the prison, there was this one Thai guy who was an American citizen, spoke perfect English, and he was there for cocaine. He was already sentenced, doing a 20-year sentence, and he acted as the translator. And then he asked me what happened, and I told him. He said to me, "You're crazy." He said the judiciary in Thailand is very different from a Western country, because now I was set up. They knew where the drugs were. I mean, I'm thinking in South Africa or any other country in the world, that's a setup. I could get benefit of the doubt. I denied the drugs. He said, no. He said, if you fight this case, I'm telling you now, you're going to get the death penalty, and you'll probably spend hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to fight your case. And in the end, you'll still be found guilty. And it's almost like an insult to the king. He said, take my advice and just plead innocent. That's going to be your best bet,
You
which
mean
I
plead
did.
guilty?
I mean, guilty, sorry. Yeah, he said, just change your plea to guilty. He said, I'm giving you good advice. You can ask anybody. Anyway, so I did that. I followed his advice. Thank goodness for that, because I would still probably be there. So I changed it. And then eventually, so while I was in Bombard now, the guys who had to work, they had to meet a quota every day. And if you didn't meet a quota, every afternoon at 2:30, just before after roll call, they would call out the people who didn't meet their quota, and they would then beat these guys with batons and kick them. And it was shocking. Every day there were beatings. And there was one specific guard, must have been about 27. I was 34 years old. He was the biggest sadist I've ever seen in my life. And one of the things that really hurt me was the human rights violations against their own people. And I still said to this one Singapore guy that I'm going to sort this guy out. One of these days, I'm going to attack him. Anyway, so long story short, we ran a casino in our cells. I made, from the cards, we had these cardboard cards that used to fit into the handle of a carrier bag, because we were folding plastic bags, which is the size of like a standard playing card. So I designed a pack of cards, and we used to play a game called Bokao, which is the same as 21, except it's 19 in Thailand. So it's the same principle. Anyway, long story short, eventually we got caught. And the room chief, who was a Thai Muslim guy, he was also the banker with us, but they caught him with the cards and everything. And they were beating him the one day. And somebody called me quickly and said, Alec, listen, they bust Mohammed. So I ran there and I grabbed the baton out of this guard's hand. And I said to him, if you're going to hit him, you must hit me as well, because I was also playing. I was hoping he was going to hit me, because I was ready to kill this guy. Anyway, he didn't hit me. Instead, he went to the building chief. Everybody left the office. Anyway, cut a long story short, they came back, and I was told to pack my bags. And now I was being thrown out of Bombard. So I remember when I was walking out and I was now being sent to Lajal prison, I was thinking, when I was in the free world, I got fired from almost every job. And now I'm even getting thrown out of this first prison. So, but I must tell you, I was so glad and elated, because flip, that was a shithole of a prison. So I actually got thrown out of Bombard eventually.
And then you went to Lad Yao, is it?
Yeah, I was in Lajal. And then finally I got sentenced in Lajal prison. Obviously, a lot happened there, as you would have read in the book. And
How long was the
from
sentence?
Lajal, so I was given the death penalty, but because I pleaded guilty, my sentence was then commuted to life imprisonment. And life in Thailand is 100 years.
Okay, let me
Which
just stop
meant
you there
now,
for a second. How did you feel that day when you got sentenced to 100 years?
So the thing was, we were hoping for like a 33-year sentence, uh, not a life sentence. My sister was with me in the courtroom. She had come up from a court case, and it didn't really matter what I was getting, because we were told by the South African embassy that they are in the early stages of negotiating a prisoner transfer treaty with Thailand. So that meant that if they did sign a treaty and I got a life sentence, I would be transferred to a prison in South Africa after 8 years. So although I knew life was 100, I mean, 100 death penalty, it's all the same thing. So there was that bit of hope. So it wasn't like, wow, I got 100 years. That's the end of me. But I mean, it wasn't, I had to be brave for my sister, So I said to, look, I'm not too worried. Who knows how long I'm going to stay? At least we know the South African government is working towards that end. So we don't know. So, I mean, it was when I got the death penalty, because when we asked the translator, what was the sentence, she said, you got the death penalty. So I said, well, that's impossible, because I mean, I've pleaded guilty. I should be getting a lower sentence. She said, hold on, let me go ask the public prosecutor. So that was a bit of a shock, because I wasn't expecting the death penalty. And then she explained that it had been commuted to 100 years. But I mean, I was expecting that. So it wasn't like a surprise or anything.
But Shani, 100 years. I mean, if I got sentenced to 100 years, it would just be hopelessness. Like, what's going on? So, I mean, when they said 100 years, were you just like, okay, I can probably get that down, or were you just like, okay, 100 years, my life is over?
No, it was over. I'm thinking, flip, this is the end. But like I said, we were counting on this prisoner transfer treaty, because America had one in place. The British had a prisoner transfer treaty in place. So there was that at the back of the mind, thinking, okay, well, I'm never going to do 100. I mean, I'll be lucky if I live till 70. I'm 34 years old. I mean, imagine staying there till 70. But like I said, I had to be strong for my sister. And already I'd, in my mind, believed wholeheartedly that the South African government was sincere and they were pushing towards this treaty. So although it was unrealistic, I mean, it's hard to absorb that, and to think 100 years. I mean, flip, I'm what's it now? I'm 34 years old. I'll never come anywhere near that, and I'll never see freedom again. But there was at the back of my mind the knowledge that our government was working towards getting this treaty in place. But I mean, it's yeah.
So when you were sentenced, then you went into a prison called the Bangkok Hilton Bangkwang prison.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, so I was first remanded for 5 days at Lajau. We were put into a transit building, and then I was taken to Bangkok prison, which is also known as the Big Tiger, the Bangkok Hilton. So,
And what was that like compared
that,
to the other prisons? Because that's a very famous prison. Like, well,
yeah.
infamous is the word.
So it's also rated as one of 10 most dangerous prisons in the world. So, I mean, you arrive there, it's obviously heavy security. I mean, all the prisons are. Now, so I've been there, what now, since October. So it was April. So I've been there 6-7 months. It was end of September, October that I was transferred to Bangkok. And I was put into the murder building, which was building 2. So now I'm thrown into this building with just basically murderers, except there were about 200 foreigners. But mainly, I'm talking, when I say 200, I'm talking also Asian foreigners. There were a lot of Nigerian guys, and we were possibly, and a lot of British guys, maybe 30 Caucasian prisoners. So it's quite a mixed blend of quite a diverse group of guys. And there I was put into a foreign cell. So we had, like, as I said, a British guy, we had from different countries. So guys are speaking English, you know, so, but it was extremely overcrowded. You had like your space was 60 centimeters, which is like my shoulder width. And we slept shoulder to shoulder. I think that first cell that I was in, we were about 22 guys, you know, and we didn't have bedding. You made a mat or a bed out of blankets, which you'd sew together, maybe that thick, and then you'd get sheets from home. You'd make a fitted sheet, and you know you'd get the guys at the tailor to make you a pillow, which was made from leftovers from the talc factory. But it's another world. I mean, it's a world within a world, and people are coexisting. You know, everybody's serving big sentences.
Did you witness any murders in prison?
You know, so my first, I witnessed a few. So one of my first that I witnessed, I was just passing by the shower, and what they had these guys they called the bad boys, Bangkok bad boys, which were a lot of assassins, you know, stabbings, and these guys were known to be extremely dangerous. You know, this guy was taking a shower, and one of the other guys came from behind and took a steel pole and literally hit him on the head, and his head like opened like a watermelon, went down on the ground, and next thing they came with a wheelbarrow and wheeled him off. And then I witnessed another high-profile murder, which was a white-collar criminal. When I was in solitary confinement, this guy slept 2 doors away from me. And I mean, there we had nothing. You slept on the concrete floor. It was extremely hard. This guy had a bed, he had a TV. So he was like protected. He had all the luxuries. You know, the one day when he came back from visit, I was still lying down and sort of looking out. I couldn't really see out, but just looking out my cell, I heard him coming because he'd always come in after everybody else. And next thing, I just heard him squealing, and I could hear the guy stabbing him. I could actually see his feet. And this guy killed him. I mean, stabbed him, I don't know, multiple times. And then they came in, the guards, and they carried him out. So this was actually something organized from outside, and they had paid money to have this guy killed. You know, the next day when I was asked, they came and said to me, "Oh, they killed Owen." You know, Owen was a fat guy. So I said, "Oh, I didn't see. Did you see anything?" I said, "No, I was sleeping. I don't know. When did this happen?" You know, so. But I was moved from that cell and I was moved upstairs. So that was another murder. And then there was another one in our building, which was head of the blue shirts, about 13 guys. I didn't see it, but I could hear the screaming because it was right under my studio where I used to paint and that. And we all ran to see what was going on. And then these guys came running out. The next thing, they brought this guy out. They'd stabbed him like 30 times. I mean, your life in prison, especially in a Thai prison, it's only worth what the moment dictates. You could have somebody stabbed for 500 baht.
Jeez. And why were you sent to solitary confinement?
So I had one of the guys there, one of the foreigners. He'd been on my case a few times. You know, first it was about stamps. He told me I must watch my back. And then it was I'd submitted, I was making all these petitions. So I became a human rights activist in prison. I was petitioning for telephones. It took me 10 years. I'm the person who got telephones into Bangkok prison. I got clean water into the prison. I managed to alleviate the overcrowding. So this was about the petition, and at the time, I just submitted now my own application for a royal pardon, and my family said, "Please, no more petitions," and blah blah blah. And I said, "Okay." And then foreigners used to get a plastic bag of white rice and a plastic bag of inedible stew. That was our food for the day. And then suddenly they changed the white rice to red rice, the same as the Thai prisoners. And this foreigner, who him and I, we used to write petitions together, had written now a petition complaining about the red rice. And why are we not getting white rice? And he asked me to sign it. And I said to him, look, I can't sign it. And I'm not going to sign it because my family told me I must stop now because I'm waiting for my royal pardon to go through, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so he threatened me and he said I must watch my back, and prison's a dangerous place. You can walk into a knife. And I said to him, you must do what you have to do, bro. And I'm going to do what I have to do. Anyway, then after that, there was another incident where the building chief had changed and we had private rooms. Now you could buy a private room. So I bought a private room, only 16 inmates in my cell. So it means you could lock it, but that was a fee every month that you paid to the guards. Anyway, we got a new building chief. He called me to the office and he said, look, the TARs are 28 in a room. You've got 16 in your room. So I would say to him, we're all big. United Nations minimum requirements for prisoners, they're entitled to 1.7 meters. So, I'd done my homework and everything, and I knew what I was talking about. And I said, we bigger and blah, 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 all the rest of it. So he said, okay, let's make a deal. You take 2. So I said, okay, cool. And anyway, I took 2 prisoners. Now, the Nigerian room had 20 guys, and he was the leader of the Nigerians, and they put 4 in their cell. So when I bumped into one of the guys, he said to me, so what happened? I said, no, we settled for 2 guys. And he said, they told us they put 4 new inmates in our cell. So I said, you know what it's like with you guys. You don't have an embassy. And what did I say? I said, they treat you like animals. That's what I said to him, which was true because the Thai authority and the Thais, they're the biggest racists. So, but I was just telling him my opinion that, so he went and he told this whole group of Klansmen that I said that the building chief said that they're a bunch of animals. So 40 of them stormed to the building chief's office and they want to know why the building chief called them animals. Anyway, I'm called to the office and I'm questioned through the translator. So I said, that isn't what I said. They're lying. This is what I said. And I walked out. Anyway, then when all this was over, I came back to the office and I bumped into their leader. A big argument ensued between the 2 of us. Now, this is the same guy who threatened me twice before. So I just landed up attacking him. We had a very violent fight. He was bleeding from all over his mouth. He attacked me with an Ambilian chair and hit me on the head with it. I had blood pouring out of my head. And anyway, eventually it was stopped. And within an hour of all this going down, I was called back to the office and we were both thrown into solitary confinement. Now, normally when a foreigner fought, they didn't care. But because I'd been writing all these letters, I'd written letters to human rights organizations around the world. Even the amnesty that we got in 1996. So that's when my sentence was reduced from 100 to 40 years, when King Bhumibol Adulyadej was celebrating his 50th anniversary to the throne. A new government came into power, Prime Minister Chuen Lik Pai. And his whole campaign was based on taking a stronger stance on drug offenders. And we weren't going to be included in that amnesty. And that amnesty was huge because it made the King of Thailand the longest reigning monarch in modern history. Now, I'd written letters to human rights organizations around the world. I tell you, I wrote to the Pope, I wrote to the Queen, I wrote to Bill Clinton, I wrote to Bishop Tutu, I wrote then to the President of South Africa. I'd written literally hundreds of letters. We got the amnesty and my sentence was reduced from 100 to 40 years. Imagine I've been there 2 years and I'm on 40 years and I'm thinking, wow, this is great. Maybe I'm going to do 10 years. So the authority had it in for me because one of the letters was submitted to the Thai ambassador to the United Nations. And on top of the letter was my name, my signature. I always put my name on top. And then I got all the other people to sign. So I became known as King of the Pen in prison. So whenever prisoners had a grievance, they used to come to me because everybody else was too shit scared to actually challenge the authority. So that's why my first fight that I had, they threw me into solitary. But I did want to go to solitary confinement because already early into my arrest, I knew I was going to write a book. Now, how can I write a book if I haven't experienced solitary confinement? So actually going to solitary was quite uplifting for me because there's no privacy when you're in the general population. Suddenly, yeah, I'm in a cell on my own. Okay, I'm locked up 24 hours a day. There's no fan.
24 hours a day.
Yeah.
You didn't even get out to exercise or anything.
They didn't let you out. You had to bribe your way out. So for the first month, I wasn't allowed out. It was it was bad. And you're sleeping on a concrete floor. Cockroaches this big,
How big was the cell?
crawling on you. So my arm's length, the length of my arms, if I stretch my arms, the length of my body, and then behind me was a shower area, which was maybe also about this wide with a tank and a sunken-in toilet. It was tiny, but now you can imagine temperatures of 40 degrees. I used to fall asleep with a piece of cardboard from my writing pad to cool myself down. It was a nightmare. But you know what? It was funny. I felt free. It was, and I was also, now you can imagine I'm drug free now. So that was in 1999 that I went to solitary. So it was like 5 years into my sentence. So now I'm drug free. My mind's clear. I'm seeing things with clarity. Suddenly I'm alone. Got a lot of time to reflect and think about things, and everything's so clear to me. And then I also continued. I managed to smuggle in a little A4 pad with some watercolors. So I started for the first time. Initially, all my work, my artwork, was done in black ballpoint pen, because black became a symbol of my oppression, my depression. And then in solitary, I experienced this unusual freedom where I was painting with color. You know, I mean, they weren't happy pictures, but it was a very important phase for me. And I also then started becoming spiritual in solitary confinement, you know. So it was an interesting experience.
And then how long were you?
It's
how long were you there
yeah.
before you got out back to the main population?
So I was in solitary for 6 months, shackled for 6 months.
Jeez.
So I waited 3 months for my case to come up, and then I got sentenced for violence for another 3 months. So I spent 2 stints of 6 months in solitary, so total a year.
And did you bribe your way out then eventually so you get like an hour outside, or did you spend 24 hours locked down?
I managed to, especially after that murder, then I managed to get out. I paid my way out, and we'd come out. I think it was about, I think about 8 o'clock in the morning or something, and we'd go back at 12 or something. So we got some time out, and we used to play that sport, taco. You know, taco? They play with like a plastic ball and without chains. I was very good at that. So that was quite impressive. Like even the guards, and I was in the taco team, and you know, so they were quite impressed.
From the book, you mentioned a couple of prisoners that were inside with you. One was quite a famous case, Eli Cohen, who murdered and butchered his wife in a Bangkok hotel and only served 9 years imprisonment. Can you tell us about him?
Yeah, so that was quite a high-profile murder because I remember seeing it on TV and that. And anyway, when he first arrived, he was put on death row. So he was in building 1. That's where the death row guys were. And then eventually he got sentenced. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think he got 25 years. And then he was transferred to my building. And anyway, being a fellow Jewish inmate, I welcomed him to my, I had like a studio where I used to paint. And I said to him, Eli, like, welcome, I said, listen, the crime you committed to me is one of the most heinous crimes, but I've also committed a crime against humanity. So heaven knows how many people the heroin that I was transporting would have killed. So I'm not going to judge you. So you're welcome to stay with me. He stayed with me for a while, but eventually he was driving me mad. He was also in my cell, and eventually I had to throw him out of my cell. And I had quite a bit of problems with a few Israelis there. I attacked them. I beat one of them up. But he was a character, Eddie. He had like a glass eye, and he was, I don't know, he was very strange. I don't know if you ever saw that series called The Saw. Did you ever see those movies?
Oh, the Saw movies, yeah.
Yeah. And we used to get videos in prison and that. And, we used to joke about it because none of us could sit through it. And he'd sit through, he watched them all. And we were saying, fuck, he's probably figuring out how he's going to mutilate his next victims, So
did he ever discuss his crime? I mean, he literally chopped up his wife in a hotel room in Bangkok.
I never really used to discuss with people, their crimes and what they were there for. A lot of the guys, that's all they used to talk about. I just wasn't really interested. But he wasn't approachable in that way. So I didn't ask him. I was just, we were all there doing collective punishment, so we don't really judge each other.
And it was your art that got you, obviously that played a huge part in getting you through your time in prison. Is that right?
Yeah. So yeah, initially it was a means of escaping my reality. But then through my art, I went through this whole process of rediscovering who I am. And my childhood dream was to be an art teacher or to do design or graphics and all that. So it definitely changed me in every way possible and became my salvation. And I knew that I had to go through different phases, not only in my artistic development, but also in my personal evolvement and in my spiritual transformation before I would be released. So it gave me purpose. And through finding purpose in life, my life became a lot more meaningful. So it was a beautiful experience. And I kind of knew that I had to be there because prison was actually saving me from myself. And in the first year that I was in prison, I used drugs. I mean, I used a bit of hash, took a cap of LSD. We were smoking a bit of weed. And then it was actually Matthew Jones who slept next to me. The British guy, hell of a nice kid. Remember, he stepped next to me, and it was the 13th of November, 1995. And I said to Matthew, after today, I'm not smoking any cigarettes. I'm not taking another drug. That's it. And ever since that day, I've never had a cigarette or a drug in 1995. So I'd made up my mind. And I knew that if I didn't, I wouldn't get out of Bangkok alive. Now, Shane Matthew, I think he got AIDS, and he was pardoned. He got a medical pardon from the King of Thailand, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know.
He was quite young, wasn't he, at the time?
Yeah, he was very, very young. Yeah, good kid. I think he's got a son. I've seen him on Facebook. He's had a boy. He's a hell of a nice guy. I don't even know. He didn't belong there, you know. He was such a good boy. I mean, for me, I deserved what I got. I've always said that I was a deliverer of death. I supplied people with drugs. I deserved what I got. It was poetic justice. I dealt drugs for 16 years. I got sentenced. I'd served 18 years. So I paid back year for year. But Matthew didn't belong there. I mean, not Matthew. Yeah, Matthew. Sorry. And then who was the other kid? Did Matthew die?
In the book, Matthew was he had AIDS and he was a heroin addict.
That's right. Yeah, shame. He got also. But no, I'm thinking of the other guy. I've forgotten his name. There was another youngster. It's a good-looking little boy, Matthew, but lost. But you know what? It's funny because a lot of the guys there, even like some of the murderers, they weren't bad people. I mean, I know that sounds ridiculous, you know. I mean, some of them were crimes of passion, others just caught up in some moments of madness. But especially amongst the foreigners, I don't think any of those foreigners deserved those hectic sentences. You know, we all made mistakes, you know.
So tell us, how did the process go? So here you are, you have 40 years, but you ended up serving 18 years. So talk us about that and talk us about your release.
Okay, so after the 40-year sentence, whenever the king had a celebration, um, there were amnesties. But now drug offenders would get less than others. That's why Eliko and Maimon, like murderers, depending on your class. So if your class is excellent, and then there's an amnesty, like they'd get a half reduction of sentence, and drug dealers would get a 1/6 or a 1/8 or a 1/9. So after that, from 1996, say, to 2011, every few years when there was an amnesty, I got a 1/6 reduction or a 1/8. So my sentence went, for example, from 40 to 36 to 33, then down to 27. And then in 2011, I'd been there 17 and a half years, and my sentence was 21 years and 7 months. Now, that December, on the 5th of December, King Bhumibol was celebrating his 7th cycle birthday, which he celebrates in years of 12, which made him 84. So it was a huge occasion. The king was sick. He was in hospital. And we were actually all praying for him not to die, because if he died, we wouldn't get that amnesty. So as it turns out, he didn't. And drug offenders got a 1/6 reduction. And if you do the mathematics from 21 years and 7 months, take away 1/6, worked out to 18 years. So I'd been there already 17 and a half years, which meant roughly I had 6 months to go. So I'd got my final release date sometime in January. Excuse me. And it worked out that I was being released on the 26th of April, 2012. Now, I had just come out of solitary confinement that November. I was extracted from Bangkok prison, and I was moved to another prison, Kabin. From Kabin, I was moved back to Lajal, and that's when I was in solitary just before the amnesty, and I was released just before then from solitary confinement. Another 6 months, I was classified as dangerous. I don't even know why I was in solitary. They had no reason. So to put me there, except that I'd been there that long and I was losing my mind. Anyway, so now, so I had 6 months left. And then I finished those last 6 months at Lajal prison. Again, I think I was in building 2. And anyway, the day came. So my sister, we used to have mobile phones, which were illegal. And she used to beg me and say to me, please just go sit on a bench. don't get into a fight. And she was telling people here in South Africa, I know my brother, he's not going to get out alive. They're going to kill him before he gets out because I've always had a temper and I've always been fighting and all that. I said to her, don't worry, I'm already going to behave myself. Anyway, the day came and we were taken to this, we called it the White House. And I waited there a little bit and I had packed my bags or whatever. So, I mean, you can't imagine the excitement. I mean, yeah, after 18 years, I'm walking out of this prison. And in my book, I think I called it My Short Walk to Freedom, which was about 500 meters from the building to the main gate. And I had to wait for a police escort because you don't just walk out of the prison and that's that you're free. No, you got to go to the deportation center. Anyway, I waited for the police. They arrived, took me outside. And I just said to the police, can I just have a moment, please? And I turned around and I looked at the towers, the prison towers. And I mean, I was out, I was free, no shackles, no handcuffs. And I just thought to myself, I thought, I can't believe that I made it. I was victorious. And then I thought, geez, where did the time go? It felt like I had walked in here yesterday. I mean, when I think about it, everything, because I kept so busy in prison all the time and there was just so much going on. That's how I survived, by keeping my mind occupied. And it was the most incredible feeling. It was like, wow, I'm alive and I'm getting out of here. I was then taken to the Thai drug suppression unit, where I was thrown into a cell. And I had a Thai girlfriend at the time, and she was coming there to meet me. She bought me a BlackBerry phone. And
sorry to
so
interrupt you.
she
What was it
came
like
there.
getting a BlackBerry phone after? I mean, you've been away from technology. All of a sudden, like here's this BlackBerry phone here.
No, but we had cell phones in Bangkok prison.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if you ever heard the story of General Chalo. Do you know the general?
No.
Yeah, you can Google him. He was the general of the police. It's a big story with the Saudi crown jewels.
Oh yeah, I know that one.
And yeah, so he was with me. We were in the same building. And he was responsible for actually introducing cell phones into the prison because he was smuggling them in. He would let us use his cell phone. So yeah, so
Sorry,
that was
Shani,
another
who
story.
this guy this general wasn't Thai, was he?
No, he was Thai. He was a Thai. He
But
was
he was in
Thai.
prison.
Yeah, because he he had killed this whole he was responsible for killing a whole Saudi delegation that came to retrieve the Saudi crown jewels. It's a big story. And he was the prince's right hand man, and today the prince is the king. But I think the general might have died. He was
So he
a
was a big shot in the prison, and he got phones
powerful
introduced.
powerful guy. I mean, the day he walked in, he inherited an entourage of 20 bodyguards. Like the main mafia boys there became his bodyguards, which were my friends. I actually had a problem with this general. I had to confront him,
What was the
and we
problem?
became good friends. Well, he wanted to take over my cell. He slept outside my cell in the corridor. And then the one day he went to the office, and in the first week that he was there, and he wanted to put two of his guys in my cell, and he just put them in. And then the office called me and said, sorry, but the general said that we must put people who are scared of him. So I went to him and I said to him, listen, I know who you are. I respect you. But at the same time, you've got to understand that this is my cell. I've paid for this. We can't just put people in here. Anyway, he said, won't I do him a favor, blah, blah, blah. We shook hands and we became friends. But yeah, he was a crazy guy. I don't want to say what were the things he did. Jesus, I mean, scary guy. But anyway, he was honorable in his ways with me. So, yeah, and then we had other guys. We had the Minister of Forestry there, was head of assassins, also a hell of a nice guy. But you're talking powerful people, like there wasn't really a hierarchy as such, but you had powerful prisoners, and then you had the Bangkok bad boys. Then you had the Chinese who ran the gambling and the heroin. Then you had the Nigerians. They also controlled some of the drugs. So you had different pockets. And then you had us foreigners. And I was like head of the foreigners. So if there was a hit on a foreigner, the Thai mafia would first come to me and ask me, you know, this is what's going to happen. Is it okay? And I would never allow it. I said, no, it's not okay.
And would they
I'll
go
take care
ahead and
of
try
it.
and do it anyway?
No, no, no. I had a lot of respect because also you must remember, like the general was my friend. I was friends with all the top guys. I used to make wine in prison, and I was one of the only prisoners who always had yeast. And I used to give certain guys, like the Thai bad boys, they all played soccer with me. I was the football coach. I was supplying footballs. I ran the gym. I owned the gym. So I was like also a very powerful prisoner. We used to call us kayais, which is a big leg. So I was a kayai. And so nobody would just, step out of line and try their luck. But I was always fair. And if the foreigner was wrong, I would rather go and slap the foreigner and, just put him back in his place, because there are a few guys whose lives I saved. I mean, the general was going to take out one foreigner because this guy came to the gym and the general was sitting there and he didn't know who the general was. And he said, what was the word he used? Like, move. And the general got up and he moved. And then his bodyguards came to me and said, do you know what happened? Yeah, I said, no, they told me. You can't go like that to a Thai, never mind to a general. So I called the guy and I said to him, you were disrespected. And I took him there to apologize. So he said to the general, oh, I'm sorry. And then he put his hand out to shake the general's hand, and the general just looked at him and said, go. I said, okay, Robert, go. It was an Australian guy. Jesus, yet they nearly finished him. And this guy wasn't a nice guy. I should have let them finish him. But if I did that, then it would make us all vulnerable.
Yeah. So right, so let's go back.
That's another
You're
story.
outside the prison, you're looking at the gates and you say, how have I survived? Take it from there.
Okay, so from there, we were taken to the Thai drug suppression unit under police escort. And that's where my girlfriend came and bought me a BlackBerry. But now I'm actually meant to be at IDC, so which is immigration. But the police didn't want to move me, the drug police. I had to pay them 2,000 baht to take me to immigration. Now they're trying to hold me there in the cell. So I understood by now how the system works. Everything works with money. So anyway, I ended up paying him. Then I was taken to the Thai drug suppression unit. I mean to
immigration detention.
They took me to immigration. There again, it's like a prison. You go through a big steel door, blah, blah, blah. They book me in. They throw me into the cell where I'm waiting. And then I'm brought out, fingerprinted, photographed. And I remember I was in this big courtyard with an open roof. And it was already dark. And I could see the stars and the moon. And I hadn't seen the stars and the moon for 18 years. So I'm just staring up, and they've got all these like visa violations and all these Burmese and a whole lot of other people. And suddenly everybody's looking up. They couldn't understand what I was so fascinated about. And then I told them in Thai that I hadn't seen the stars for 18 years. It was the most incredible feeling. Anyway, I was eventually taken upstairs and thrown into a cell there. There must have been about 80 guys. And there was a small room at the back, like a private room. And as I was coming in, suddenly 2-3 Chinese guys, hey, Alex, shit, how are you? And like a few of my mates were there that were in Bangkok with me, like 5 years ago and 4 years ago and 3 years ago. He said, no, come, you're going to stay here with us in this room, you know. So I was held there for 5 days. It was a terrible place. Jesus, there were two working toilets that weren't working properly, and like a shower area with a trough, and the feces was floating past your legs as you were showering. It was, I mean, I broke out in a skin rash. I hardly slept while I was there. Everybody was smoking. I had my mask. I worn mask in Bangkok as well all the time because of the smells. But it didn't bother me, you know. I mean, I knew I had 5 days to go. You know, on the fifth day, now they've been processed. The embassy have visited me. They've prepared a uh, temporary passport documents, and then I was taken by the police to the airport. There was another South African girl there who got released the same time as me. She'd also done about 18 years. And I remember driving to the airport and the vast open spaces. It was the most unbelievable feeling. This girl and I, we were both talking. I don't even remember what we spoke about, but we were just so excited, you know. And then we got to the airport, checked our stuff in. I had quite a few people there at that time. I had a girlfriend, a Swiss girlfriend. Her name was Elizabeth, and she had done so much for me. She was unbelievable. I met her there as well, but we didn't have much time together. And then I was taken downstairs to the immigration police or something. We were locked in a room, and I'm thinking, you know, I'm meant to be free, but yet I'm still being treated like a criminal. You know, so we had to wait for all the passengers to board the plane, and then they brought the two of us up.
Were you
My
handcuffed?
parents, my mom. No, I wasn't handcuffed. No, it was downstairs. But we were locked into this room with some other immigration police. Anyway, we were handed over to the captain. He signed over. And I think that's when I stepped onto that plane that I knew that, okay, there's no going back here. I'm free. You know, my mom had bought me a first class ticket. So I was ushered to the first class section. She went to economy. And I walked in there and I was sitting on the seats, and it was just so comfortable that it was uncomfortable. You know, I couldn't even sit on the chair. And then the plane took off, you know, and I remember that I looked behind me and I could see the Bangkok lights fading. That was the most incredible feeling. I was just so excited. I mean, I just couldn't even contain myself. And then I tried to watch TV. There was a TV in front of me in the chair, and I was just so uncomfortable. Everything was too soft, and all this luxury and the food. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't use the toilet because, you know, we used to squat. I couldn't sit on the toilet on the plane. But anyway, my excitement I was just so overwhelmed. But also with all the excitement as well, it's actually quite frightening thinking coming out into society, a lot of things would have changed. You know, I had changed. You know, we landed at Oliver Tambo. I was one of the first people to exit the plane. And it was just so unbelievable to be back on African soil.
Yeah,
And
like
then
South
when I
Africa
came,
went through some major changes in the 18 years
yeah,
that you were locked up. I mean, it was 18 years into its democracy when you were released. When you were
yeah.
sentenced, apartheid was still going on in South Africa. So how did it feel to be back, and had the country changed?
So yeah. So listen, I mean, just quickly, the scene at the airport was quite important because when I
Oh yeah,
came
okay.
out through when I arrived at arrivals, there were hundreds of people. My family was there. They had these banners. Initially, I didn't know who was the television was there, and all these journalists and everything. I was wondering, like thinking, like, was there a rock and roll band on the plane? You know, so it was very nerve wracking. And like I hadn't seen my mom for 18 years, and then I came out. She was the first person to come to me, and she had this bouquet of roses. And I thought, this is weird, you know, my mom buying me roses, and I went to take the roses from her, and then she pulled it away, and then I tried to pull it, and then I realized, shame, somebody must have given me these roses, you know. So it was very overwhelming. The media were there and everything, but yeah, it was a different country, you know. Besides the technology and the electric billboards, South Africa was a changed place. Um, so, I mean, I just found that although things were very different, and especially with social integration, I mean, it was crazy. Everybody now was free, everybody, it was equality. And, you know, it was actually quite a beautiful feeling. It was like I could have been in New York or something. But, and then on some hands, we still had segregation, and I mean, we still had the townships, and there were just some areas that had become completely black, where they weren't even white. So you had like Hillbrow, which, I mean, everything used to be white before, but now it was mixed. Everybody had moved into the suburbs. It was beautiful, you know. So very different, but also there was a lot of security, barbed wire fencing, security companies. So there was a lot of crime as well at the time. So which we still have anyway. But yeah, all in all, it was wonderful.
How's your life now, Shani? You've been released, you've been free for 12 years.
So the thing is that, you know, again, you know, when I look back at the time and that, I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I've come like such a long way. So today I live as a free man in one of the world's most colorful and vibrant cities, Johannesburg. So now I'm living my dream and supporting myself as an artist. I'm also teaching, which has not been easy. But how many people can you say get to do what they love every day? So the struggles are worthwhile. So it's been 12 years since I left prison, and I mean, you can imagine how difficult the adjustment was, and even now still challenging. I think the emotion that I feel most strongly is gratitude. You know, I appreciate my freedom, my life, my health, which hasn't been too great lately, my family, my country, and the many friendships I have, because I know what it's like to have lost all of those things and taken from me. So I also find joy in the simplest of things, like painting alone. You know, I do barefoot hiking. I love watching sunsets, teaching art to my students, having a warm bath, a nice bed. So all these things. And I appreciate the uniqueness of South Africa, the people and the different cultures, the energy. This place can make you crazy, but I was away for far too long. So to feel anything then other than love for my country, you know, I feel as though sometimes I've lived 1,000 lives. My life as an aimless young man, a chronic drug addict, convicted prisoner, and then finally a free man who actually wasn't free in his mind. Today, I'm still learning what it means to be free. And I'm still overcoming some of the demons that led me to those dark places. And time and again, I find a return to my art, which is all I had. I mean, in prison, that's all I had. And that today still brings me the most peace and joy. So I'm in a beautiful place, and I've recently met the love of my life, and we got engaged. So
Congratulations.
thank you. So I have a beautiful life. I'm trying to write a second book. Also been trying to get a movie deal, which I think would be the cherry on the cake, because there's just so many lessons to be learned. And I think we all have a story, you know. So I'm not unique in that way, but I think when we share our experiences in life, it gives us a different perspective on our own lives, and life is our greatest teacher. So it was, in many ways, I'm grateful to the Thai prison system, because if not for them, I wouldn't be who I am today. So I'm often asked if I have any regrets. So I don't regret much that I've done in my life, but if I had to have the opportunity of having my life again, I think I'd definitely do it without drugs, because I was very lucky to survive that.
Absolutely, mate. I can feel the emotion from you, and like I'm getting a bit emotional listening to you talk. I mean, it's profound. But this is my last, I suppose, my last question. Do you have any advice for the younger generations? I mean, you've lived a remarkable life. I'm sure you know the things that you've done or the things that have happened. You probably don't wish that they've happened that way. But if you were to give advice to younger people to steer them off maybe the path that you went down, what would you say to them?
What I would say is, listen to your parents, listen to your teachers, and the choices you make today and every day will not only determine your future, but ultimately define who you are. And I think for them to hear my story, and I do anti-drug talks at school, so you cannot say to a child, don't use drugs, don't do this, don't do that. Often they got to learn for themselves, and then get to understand the dangers and consequences of drugs, because using drugs only have two paths. You're either going to land up dead, or you're going to land up in prison like I did. So don't make the same mistakes I made. And sometimes making the right choices, while the most difficult path, is the greatest blessing you can give yourself. So I think that's my message, stay away from drugs. Look what it did to my life. I mean, I was a brilliant footballer. When I was 16, I played under 21. My dream was to play for the Premier League. And then when I was young, I got high, had a motorbike accident, broke my leg. And that was the end of my football career, all because of drugs. I think kids should go and visit the orthopedic section in some of the hospitals and see how many people are in there whose lives have been destroyed through drugs. So drugs kill and they destroy lives. Why learn the hard way? Why go through what I went through? So hopefully the message gets out there.
Shani, you've written a book as well, which is what I based all the questions today from.
I've
It's a
got a copy
fantastic
here.
book. Yeah. Stick it up there.
Yeah.
Dragons and Butterflies. If somebody wants to get a copy of it, how do they get a copy of it?
So you can only get it on Amazon. It's available in an ebook. And then sometimes I find people selling them, because it was printed in 2014 and they ran it for about 3-4 years. So I only have a few of these copies left. But again, if you contact me on Facebook or something, I'm happy to send it to the person in a PDF. I'm under Shani Krebs on Facebook, and I'm always happy to help families to come in as a mediator where they're having problems with their kids, or in any way that I can advise them to help their kids maybe get off drugs, or whatever I can do. I'm always willing to help.
If anybody wants to buy some of your art, the rhino behind you, did you paint that?
Yeah, that's one of my pictures, the rhino.
Brilliant. So if anybody wants to buy
you.
your art, how can they do that as well? Through your Facebook?
They can contact me on Facebook, and we can open up a line of communication on WhatsApp or through email. I can send them images of what's available, and yeah, we take it from there. Everything's negotiable.
Brilliant. Just make sure that you don't click on any dodgy links.
Yeah.
You don't want to get hacked again.
No, don't worry. You know what I always say, you can't con an ex-con. So yeah.
Shani, it's been amazing. This has been absolutely, like, throughout this whole interview, I've gone through a range of emotions. I felt shivers go down my spine a couple of times. Just thank you so much for coming on here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. I've actually stopped giving interviews. Another guy was blogging. He wanted me to do an interview. So I just said to him, what's in it for me? And I didn't hear from him again. So you didn't try hard enough. so, but I just had a good feeling about you, and it's been brilliant. Thank you. I really appreciate you getting my story out there even more. It's fantastic, and thank you. I think what you're doing is great.
Thanks very much, and I hope that I can tell it's been, I don't even know how to describe it, but I can tell you're very reflective. You regret what you've done, but you've done amazing things as well. I mean, you've shown that, like, how someone can take turn on the wrong path and make mistakes, but then you can come back from your mistakes. So your mistakes don't define your life.
Yeah, no, and that to me is something beautiful, that I've been able to turn my life around and to bring value to the world and to people. And another thing with kids and that, and especially now as an adult as well, I'm very selective of who I choose to be my friends. And that's an important message to the children as well. You want to be friends with somebody who lifts you up, not somebody who's going to pull you down. So I surround myself with people who are uplifting and who can inspire me, and I can inspire them, and we bring value to the world. Bring your better self.
All right, we'll leave it on that. We'll leave it on that. Well, thanks so much, Shani, and I really appreciate it again.
Thank you.
Have a fantastic day. Thank you so much.
Sawadee Kap.
Sawadee Kap. Hop gun mak kap.
Bye,
Bye, Shani.
Right, bye.